Croeso cynnes iawn I bawb, i'r cyfarfod heddiw. Welcome to everybody to today's meeting. Our last meeting was on, I think, the 18th of January, so it was about just over 6 weeks ago. So I'm anticipating this meeting will be relatively short, and we've got a much shorter agenda this time. So we were anxious to be able to keep the forward schedule of meetings in place. So it's important that we did have today's meeting. Could I introduce Jill, also with the warmest of welcomes, Jill, as a new full member of this committee. And Jill, that's a change which is the result of some changes of roles for the board as members as a whole, which I've got to come back to in the chair's report. But in the meantime, Jill, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
We were expecting Jonathan Morgan to join us, but so if he does, he's here as an observer and part of his induction program as a new IM.
Apologies, Ruth. I've just checked that it doesn't appear to me he's been invited, so apologies for that. I'll look into that and see what's going on.
Okay. In which case, David, can we let him know when the next meeting is? Because
yes, most certainly we'd like him to attend at least 2 meetings of the Education Committee this year.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who I need to welcome that hasn't been before? No. Apologies for absence. I don't believe we have any, do we? Or Martin? Or are there any?
Just Tom Lawson.
Tom, thank you. Declarations of interest. Can I take any declarations that we aren't already aware of in relation to the agenda today?
So we are considering phase 2 of the strategic review of education. So we'd ask members with contacts to Welsh universities in particular to declare those interests now, please.
Could we, so we should then declare verbally any previously declared associations with universities or education providers.
Yes,
I will start by saying that I am the chair of the advisory board to the Welsh Centre for Public Policy, which is based at Cardiff University. Anybody else to follow?
I'm a fellow of the University of South Wales office.
So it's Push speaking. I'm honorary chair at Swansea University Department of Medicine.
Thank you, Push. Anybody else?
I'm honorary professor of the School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Science at Cardiff University.
Thank you. Anybody else? Can we note those declarations, David, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Can we now move on to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 18th of January? And I'll take you through them for accuracy. We just bear with me a second while I find them. They're page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, and a small amount on page 9.
Apologies, Chair. It was just my surname is incorrectly spelled, just as a point of accuracy on page 1.
Thank you, Mark. Sorry, I missed your hand. I'm looking at the minutes. Anybody else, any amendments or corrections to those minutes? Thank you. Can I take them with that amendment from Margaret as a correct record? In which case, we turn to the action log. And this is relatively brief. David, can you just tell us where we're at with the induction resources?
Yes, so we've been preparing 3 induction resources altogether. So with regards to the board and the audit committee, we've completed those. With regards to the education committee, as you know, I've been working with yourself and Tina developing the induction process. Apologies, it's taken longer than I expected. I would hope to complete it in the next 4 to 6 weeks, but apologies for the delay.
So that might be something that we could bring to the next meeting.
We could do that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to see it in the meantime, but it would be
yes, of course,
perhaps to log it for bringing to a committee at some point. Thank you. And the feedback on the multi-professional Q&E group, we're going to come to at the end of the agenda, so we'll come back to that. That brings us to Chair's report. We haven't done this previously, but it seemed to be an appropriate thing to do to report back on the stakeholder reference group, which was held at the beginning of February, on 1st of February, in which I attended to represent this committee, and which the chair, Chris Jones, chaired. It was the first meeting. It was very well attended. There were over 40 different groups represented, and there was constructive discussion and a lively and productive meeting. The arrangements for the future are that the chair will report back on key matters to the board across the whole board's agenda, and the chair of this committee will bring back to ECQC the items raised by stakeholders which are particularly relevant to our business. One of the advantages of the new arrangements is that stakeholders have the opportunity to contribute across the whole of HEIW's work and responsibilities, but also we can take from that the advice that's particularly relevant to us. Stakeholders were keen to know how this committee would be receiving advice and acting on it, and how their advice would be taken into account. And that's a matter that over time, I'm sure we will be working out between us. Chair was very anxious to explain that the stakeholders and ourselves need to work together to make a system that works for both of us and is to our mutual advantage. Other issues raised, and in particular, equality and diversity was emphasised, and it came up in a number of different ways across the whole breadth of it. And I'm sure that will be reported by the chair to the board. There were questions about the student voice and how the student voice was being taken into account, and also specific questions on the approach to phase 2, the strategic review, and particularly in relation to the timetable and how stakeholder advice will be taken into account there. We had a presentation on the mental health workforce strategy consultation process, and the arrangements were explained for contributing to that consultation. So it was an important first meeting, and I'm not sure what the date for the next one is, but the date has been set. And we look forward to seeing how that new resource for the organisation and for us here will develop. So that's one thing to report back. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is the new IM board responsibilities, which have been a consequence of the change in IM membership, with John leaving, John Hill-Tout leaving, and new members coming. And as far as this committee is concerned, we will be benefiting from additional membership, and that is particularly welcome, with Jill being a full member and also bringing to us the connection with AAC. We are also going to have a change of chair, in that I'm going to be stepping down and joining and continuing with the committee as a member, and Tina is going to take over the chair, which I am delighted to let you know, and delighted to welcome Tina to this this role. With that, can I just say that I'm very, very grateful to all of those on the committee who've helped and supported us during the development phase. We started with a blank sheet of paper, and it does seem that we have grown in wisdom and stature, and I'm sure that will continue as things move forward. So I'm going to wish Tina all the very best for her future as in the chair here. We have agreed between us that I would continue to chair this meeting because all the prior work for this meeting has already been undertaken, and I've been involved in that. And Tina, you take over from the next meeting, or from now, and take the committee forward. The final, very brief thing to report is the last Audit and Assurance Committee, and just to say that I attended that. I regret to say I haven't made a note of what date that was, and the only issue that arose of an immediate relevance to ECQC was a query about the extent to which our means of assessing compliance with the revalidation process for doctors actually reflects or the value of that process. And that is a very tricky question, and one that's been around for a long time. But maybe at some point it's a multi-professional question about the way that we assess and revalidate and assure quality of our health professionals. So I'll leave that with you. But I'm happy to answer any questions or any queries, and anything I've missed out, please let me know. Push, so I can't see. I've only got
yeah.
Probably on the screen, so you have to shout at me.
So I heard about the issue in Audit Committee about revalidation from a different source, and I'm very happy to discuss that matter at Audit Committee in the future. The fact is, revalidation is part of the law. We have to do it, and the processes within in Wales are probably further developed and thought highly of than anywhere else in the UK. So I'm pretty confident that we satisfy most requirements of revalidation here in Wales.
Thanks, Push. I'm sure we do. It's just to get that assurance. So that's very helpful. Thank you. Tina.
Thanks, Chair. There were just a couple of things. One is in relation to the stakeholder group that you reported on in your chair's meeting. It's just when the update went to the whole board, I reflected on quite a lot of the papers that we're receiving today, which talks about the importance of stakeholder engagement, both from a commissioning, placements, and we've got groups involved in that. So the question I was going to ask is how those stakeholders that participate within each of the professional groups actually feed into the overarching stakeholder group. Because when I looked at the membership, there's a number of organisations that have 2 or 3 people attending from the same organisation, some organisations that aren't attending. I just wondered whether for the next meeting, David, we could have a look at the membership of that stakeholder group, and also how some of the recommendations in the papers today, especially around pharmacy, nursing placements, actually how we actually tie in those stakeholder views in terms of the whole board. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tina.
Yes, I can look into that with you, Tina. If I could catch up with you after the meeting, you can go with that in a bit more detail.
Anything else on the report?
Ruth, the other thing I wanted to say was a huge thanks to welcoming me taking over for the next meeting, and just to say on behalf of the committee, I'm sure we'll say it at the end, but it's been absolutely superb having you as the chair, setting up this committee and engaging with us as a team, working for the betterment of commissioning. So on behalf of the committee, thank you so much for that.
Oh, well, Tina, that's very kind of you. It seems to have gone in a flash, but we've done it together, and that's the way we should. So excellent. Thanks very much.
Can I just add those thanks from everybody on the exec team? That's been, I think I'm the only original member of that committee from execs, apart from David. So so many thanks again, Ruth, and it's good to see that you'll be staying with us in other roles, which is great. Could I just say something about the stakeholder reference group? I think that having the membership wide, as as it is a good thing, but there is we've got to make sure that we manage expectations of all these organizations, because I've had 3 notes today about that require responses. One is from the Parkinson's Society, and the truth of the matter is we don't deal with individual conditions. We train specialists who can and professionals who can help with support for people in classes of conditions, let's say neurology, or in this case, or endocrinology. We don't, it's like somebody said, why aren't we training more orthogeriatricians? Because that's not recognized as a specialty for training. So we've just got to make sure that we manage expectations. And I've had 2 other responses from the Royal College of GPs and the Royal College of Physicians complaining that they individually aren't invited to the meetings. Well, the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges is invited to the meetings to represent them. So I think there's some misunderstandings out there that we've still got work to do on.
Well, it's an opportunity to sort out maybe some wider misunderstandings and lack of appreciation, but thanks, Bush. We've got David and then Lisa.
2 points from me. So just to kind of support completely what Push said, and thanking you for all your work in setting up this committee. It was initially a blank sheet of paper. This committee is unique in Wales. We don't have another education and training committee within the NHS in Wales, and therefore it literally was a blank sheet of paper. We've got nothing to follow. And thank you for your leadership in enabling us to set up the committee and getting us to where we are today. The second point is slightly less comfortable. So apologies, I just misled the committee at the beginning. I'm afraid I'm not fully au fait with Zoom. We had, in fact, created the link and invited Jonathan, and in fact, he is on the call, so as an observer. So apologies to the committee, and welcome, Jonathan.
Jonathan, I can't see your picture, but you're very welcome, and we did sort of welcome you in your absence at the beginning. So it's and please feel free to contribute. Lisa.
Thank you, Actually, Chair. It's just picking up at you on the issue about the stakeholder reference group, and it was the inaugural meeting, and we did invite many more members than we previously had engaged. I think we probably need to remind ourselves that this was a stakeholder reference group, which was broader than the Education and Training Committee as we currently have it. This was an opportunity to engage actually a wider range of stakeholders in the work of HEIW. And the Education and Training Committee is one component part of that. And as Push says, that obviously there are a number of questions that quite rightly people are asking about, because they are now starting to appreciate what the role and responsibility of HEIW is. So that's actually them engaged actually in that strategic arena and being introduced to the work. So there's a positive element in that respect, that we're actually able to convey the work of HEIW through that forum. Push is right, that there will actually be questions, but I think it's points of clarification of, where that group actually sits and how they get involved. And in response to what Tina's asking about engagement of other groups, we engage at many different levels on different arenas with different programs, which is quite appropriate. But what we've actually made sure is that stakeholder group, which will be made aware of the development of a number of the programs that we undertake. And of course, what we did take there was actually the education and training plan that we are currently developing for 2023, so that they become aware. But actually the key message from that group was for those members to go back and check that people from their organisations are linked into the key pieces of work that we're doing as well. So there's a multi-layer of engagement, but as you say, that was the strategic group to look at what the work of HEIW and to be engaged in influencing and actually sort of working with us to develop that better.
Thank you, Lisa. And at the meeting, and since the chair has been very clear that this is a developmental process, and we will need to iterate together what the best arrangements are. So I think that it will evolve and change over time.
Ruth, can you see my hand? I'm not sure it's been up.
Oh, sorry, I can't, because it's on the, no, it's on the yellow bit.
Right.
Jill.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much for the welcome to the committee. I think I've been first reserve, haven't I, for the last couple of years, in case anybody has an injury or whatever. So nice to be a full member. So thank you for that, and apologies to everybody if I ask some very naive questions as a new member of the committee. I just wanted to build a little bit on what's been said by both Lisa and Tina, because it sort of flows through all the papers today, and I've written the same sort of thing down against each of the papers. The stakeholder, we've got to be really clear, I think, what the stakeholder reference group is for, and the engagement with the key stakeholders in terms of how we deliver on some of the things that we're talking about in terms of commissioning. And I think that's borne out a little bit by the notes that Push referred to in terms of raising expectations in the wrong direction. And each of the papers that we've got today talks about very clearly, we can do our part, but it's dependent on an increase at base, as it were, in terms of the resources to train. And I'm very sort of focused on how we influence that, where the costs are in that, where the people are going to come from, and how that's reflected, I guess, in the papers today. So I wonder if, as a general point, when we go through the medical farms, each of the papers, we could pick that up as a specific, because in each of them, we talk about no additional financial implications. And I'm not quite sure that is true, because it's dependent on additional resources in some of our stakeholder organisations. So I just wondered if when we go through each of the papers, as a general theme, we can pick that up versus perhaps the wider stakeholder that you referred to, Ruth.
Yeah.
And so we don't muddle them up, and we don't think that the stakeholder reference group delivers on the other. And I think Lisa touched on that when she referred to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Jill. I think that's very much part of the sort of developmental sorting out that we need to do. We made a start, but actually there's a lot of finessing that we need to add. Your point about the resources in the quality updates, very relevant one. the format of those reports is new. And it's still at the starting gate, really, and will take a bit of time to develop.
Yes.
But sort of, ideas maybe could be built in as we go forward. But with that, shall we move on to the quality updates? And you will all be aware that we have been through these as recently as 6 weeks ago, and some of it may not have moved very much. Some of the reporting and the reporting mechanisms haven't moved these very much in the interim. So I'm anticipating that there will be, this will be fairly efficient, should we put it that way? But let's start with medical. And Butcher, you go to.
Yep, that's correct. So the paper is in a shortened version of the last meeting's format. And we decided to try and only report on major exceptions. So the bit that I really want to focus on, which is important for assurance purposes, is the training concerns. So that comes at the start of page 4, I think it is. Yeah, where we talk about quality management and educational governance. So you'll see that there's still a number of areas which are remaining enhanced monitoring. Obstetrics and gynecology in Prince Charles and Royal Glamorgan, where we have ongoing monitoring taking place. We had a recent visit on the 17th, and it showed that the improvement trajectory that had been present previously was being maintained, and there were further improvements identified. There were still some things that we require for us to take them out of enhanced monitoring. They're at the stage now that if we went to visit them, we wouldn't put them into enhanced monitoring, but because they've been in enhanced monitoring, we want certain things to be done to take them out of it. So I think that's where we are. Further visit is planned in May of this year. So that's where that one is. Pleasingly, obstetrics and gynecology in Princess of Wales, which was originally put into enhanced monitoring because they were undergoing a reconfiguration, and then at a later visit there were some concerns that were raised about clinical supervision, has now addressed nearly all of the issues that we had raised with them. The last visit was on the 25th of November, and the findings were very positive. And given that, we have recommended that is no longer in enhanced monitoring with the GMC, and they have accepted that. So given that, we won't be reporting with any further reports on enhanced monitoring for obstetrics and gynecology in Princess of Wales. So that's good. Wrexham Myla. You'll recall that we put Wrexham into enhanced monitoring because of sustained failure to address training concerns, supervision, and educational opportunities. At no time was it, had we gone to any one of those anywhere else, and we had one individual reporter in Department of Medicine, let's say in another hospital, we wouldn't put them into enhanced monitoring, but it was the fact that they hadn't improved over a period of time. I think that that the fact that we put them into enhanced monitoring has been a driver for change and a change of culture, and we visited on the 3rd of December. That progress was being made despite the pressures in medicine and despite the remaining COVID pressures that were in place at that time. So we're generally very pleased, but it remains in that state until we visit again in the summer of this year. Emergency medicine in Morrison Hospital, similarly, that is improving. We visited on the 30th of November of 2021. We made some specific recommendations against which progress will be monitoring, and another visit in the summer. But we are pleased that they've made some improvements in the balance that they have between service and education provision. When you look back, and this is my own hospital, this was all linked. It shows how fragile some things can be. This was all linked to the retirement of one individual who took on a huge amount of work personally and was responsible for the good training as a single individual. Shows how much the department was leaning on that person, and they need to have a more sustainable educational infrastructure to keep things going. So we're fairly happy with that. The two places where we got more concerns, first is trauma and orthopedics in Morriston Hospital. Now, one of the big issues there is exposure to elective surgery. That has been a massive problem across the whole of Wales, but it's only in this place that there doesn't seem to be any progress. So much so that we raised our concerns with the GMC prior to this visit on the 8th of December, and they decided to come with us. They have written separately to the chairman of the health board, raising their concerns about trauma and orthopedics in Swansea, and have asked for monthly updates directly to the GMC as well as to us. So they stopped short of putting conditions on training, which is their terminology for withdrawal of trainees. So I think it's important that that's recognised. They are aware at the highest level, at exec level, and they're looking for solutions, including some reconfiguration of their services to different hospitals so the training can be maintained, and also negotiating with the local private hospital where trainees can go and get that training. So there's real concerns there. They are aware of them, and the GMC are heavily involved. And finally, an Aaron Bevan University Health Board, you'll recall that we haven't put them into enhanced monitoring, but we have had high level of scrutiny. And the reason for that is that they, as part of the COVID response, they opened the Grange early as a sort of Nightingale hospital, or a not a field hospital, but another hospital to cope with the surges of COVID. And then we were left with 4 medical intakes, or 4 intakes, emergency intakes across an Aaron Bevan, and we don't have the training infrastructure to support that. Now, prior to the Grange being commissioned, we were in many conversations with an Aaron Bevan, and even before HRW came into being, we said that the ideal situation for medical intake, which was the one that was most at risk, would be 2 sites. At a push, it could be 3 with extra cover from consultants. And having 4 was just not acceptable. The problem is that they were dealing with a different time with lots of different pressures. And like all hospitals have been busy, it's been very difficult for them to remove those 4 medical on-calls. The good thing is that, and this is following a meeting that we had, a last oversight group meeting last Friday, was following a letter I wrote to the medical director. The whole exec team is now focused on reducing the number of medical on-calls within an Aaron Bevan down to 3 for our trainees, which is finally some light at the end of the tunnel in this. And that's where, so I'm reassured that they are addressing these issues robustly. They recognize that it's right for the trainees to have these improvements made. So I have a certain degree of optimism that we're going to get there with an Aaron Bevan. The remaining specialties outside medicine have all settled down in an Aaron Bevan. So our training oversight group now is mainly related to the medical on-calls, not the other specialties. So that sort of indicates us not putting the health board into enhanced monitoring, which is one of the options that we could have had. So I'm satisfied that that's the case. And if there were to be any elevation of monitoring, that would be in the specialty of medicine only. So I'll stop there with that bit. Shall I pause there to see if there's any other comments that anybody wants to talk about those?
And thanks, Bush. And what it does show is that things do move, and that things have changed since we last got together. But yeah. Any comments or feedback for Push on those? You may have to shout because I can't see everybody. Hang on, try that. No. Push, the other thing that this says to me is that it's worth doing, because obviously the interventions that we've been taking have moved things on. So in terms of its assurance as a process, I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, and you know, I can be just as frustrated as yourselves when it seems that there isn't, or it goes at a slow pace. Behind the scenes, we are always collecting information. We get information from trainees themselves, from trainers. You know, the one about cardiac surgery, for example, that hit the press. You know, we're heavily involved in the processes there. We didn't see any reason to put them into enhanced monitoring, even though the GMC were aware that it had hit the press, because we have seen that the health board has put in robust actions to try and address some of the things that had been alleged in the press. So yes, there's constant information being dealt with. Doing formal visits is usually done in a way where we know what we're going to see when we get there, because we've got all the information in advance. So it's a formalization of a process sometimes, rather than something that's a surprise.
Well, we'll come back to it at the next meeting, but thank you very much for the update. Let's move on to Kirsty and dentistry.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, there's not a great deal to report since the last meeting. We are, the recruitment figures are there. We're currently recruiting for our educational supervisors for dental foundation training for next September. We're in the middle of doing that at the moment, and that process is going well. Quality management and governance, section 2, dental foundation training. There's a typo on the paper, apologies. It says Royal College of Physicians window, and RCP for us is review of competence progression. So just to draw attention to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the acronym, sorry. And I can give an update in terms of progression there, because the interim RCPs have now taken place and trainees are progressing as expected. Some COVID impact still, but we've got the remainder of their programme up till the end of August for them to catch up on any outstanding actions. The same with dental core training. The interim review of competence progression meetings have taken place, and all trainees are progressing as anticipated, despite impact to services. There's no impact to training at the moment, and specialty the same. No major concerns to report in trainee progression. We have a trainee forum that we've established where they are able to feedback and raise any concerns, and that's been very good. Highlighted at the moment, the majority of concerns have been around operational issues for them, around expenses, etc., but it's an opportunity for them to feedback any concerns they have. So that's going well, and the second meeting is due to take place shortly. And we are updating our dental core training and reviewing it against the quality framework. So we've got a series of workshops going on there to establish the best way forward there, and really good outcome with the GDC regulatory report on dental specialty training, which is the only part of the dental training that they have jurisdiction over. Really good outcome, 18 standards met, 2 partly met, with actions for us to take forward, which was better than we'd anticipated, and certainly better than anywhere else in the UK. So really good outcomes there, and very relatively minor actions that we're already addressing and taking forward. So I think that's it. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
No, thank you, Kirsty. Any point of feedback for Kirsty on dental?
Ruth, could I just ask a quick question? It's Jill. Thanks, Kirsty, and sorry, you may have answered this way back at this in this committee. It's on my theme about the resources available for training in the host organisations or the surgeries or whatever. Have we got any risk, given the pressure on dental as a result of the pandemic? Have we got any risk associated with finding suitable places for the trainees?
I think it's a great question, Jill, and yes would be my immediate answer. But the risks are for us in primary care, not in secondary care. I think secondary care is okay. This is we don't have any issues there. The risks for us in primary care and dentistry, particularly with the dental practices as independent contractors. And that's why I mentioned early on that we are currently recruiting for the education supervisors in dental foundation training, because we weren't sure that we would get sufficient this year, because we try and match the numbers to what comes out of the dental school, the new graduates, because there's a lot of disquiet in the system at the moment around contracts and NHS contracts and restarting, etc. And we weren't sure whether that would have an effect on practices wanting to act as trainers. We think there are enough. At the moment, it's too early to say. We can't pull off the reports completely, and there's a quality assurance that we have to work through, and I should be able to report at the next meeting, but we think there are enough for this year. But it is a risk, and I think we are right. You are right to raise it.
Yeah. Move on then.
I was just going to say, Chair, if that's okay, that we do have an HEIW cost where we have a responsibility for some of the simulation equipment, and we have previously used some of our capital allowance to update some of that, and that's an ongoing risk if we move more to the simulation side of things. So that is something that would be a future cost pressure, and of course, if we do increase our interest in training other dental professionals, then like everywhere else, we talk about it all the time, is placement capacity. So I think that would be a financial risk to us in the future as well. But as we put all of these things into our education training plan, we hope that those costs are met through that process. Just to tell Jill that that's where we go for it. So just wanted to add those things.
Thank you, Push. Lisa?
And yes, good question, Jill. And in response to probably the pressure on the system, I think you're quite right, because what we can be doing, and I'm sure we'll come on to this sort of at some point, whereby we are to do commission education from HEIs. They recruit people to those programs, and people do graduate, and then as a result of that graduation, there are not always vacancies available in order to accommodate them. And Kirsty and I are currently sort of looking at, we've got a current situation with dental hygienists as an example, whereby we have been asked to commission them. We've obviously trained them, and they're now coming out as graduates. There's insufficient vacancies in order to recruit those people. And this is where the tripartite arrangement needs to be between HEIW, between service, and the financial implications, because that, and as Kirsty says, it's the demands on the current service and their need to prioritise, but this is not good for the student experience, because they're expected to find a job. And, there is a risk there that we will lose them from Wales as a consequence. Hope that's helpful, Jill.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Jill, for raising it. And it seems to me that we'll likely come back to that in future meetings. Margaret, there's an awful lot going on in pharmacy.
Yes, there is rather. So, yeah, I think I don't want to do it. I'm sure you all had a chance to read the update. I think the highlights for me I wanted to point out is that, we certainly for our pre-registration pharmacy technicians and our trainee pharmacists foundation program, we've got a really, really good quality product. And in both of those sectors now, I know we had some challenges with quality in our pre-registration pharmacy technician program, but that all the signs are that we really have with our new provider a really top class program, and we're really delighted, as you can see, that we started our new cohort, and that we have been able to attract quite a significant number of our community pharmacy colleagues, and I think that will increase. We are anticipating an increase of demand, particularly from our community pharmacy colleagues into that programme because of the new contract that's about to be launched in April, whereby there is some real clear steer in that pharmacy contract to change their skill mix, develop their workforce to be able to deliver the new services, clinical services that the new contract is asking. So we are already seeing an increased demand from our community pharmacy colleagues for that training. So I'm really pleased we've got a quality product. The same with our trainee foundation programme. I think I mentioned this last time. We had a 100% fill into our programme for this year, which is against just over 50% fill across the whole of the UK. It just shows that we've got a really quality product that is what trainees want and want to come to Wales for that product. So I think we're in a really good place with both of those from a quality point of view. I suppose the frustration, and it's coming back to Jill's comment, is twofold. It's having enough capacity to be able to do more numbers. So that is a risk that we are trying to manage, and it is probably the biggest risk that we're to be able to expand and meet demand is quite difficult if you don't have the resource at site to be able to do it. We know we are working with our stakeholders to look at all the workforce issues, because they are struggling just to deliver patient services, and when you try to then layer on top of that changes to education and training, that becomes quite an overwhelming thing for them to sort of get their heads around when they're just trying to manage patient services. So we are doing a piece of work with our stakeholders to help them to find solutions for just their current crisis, as well as then talking about what is the educational infrastructure you need to be able to deliver this quality education and change. So I suppose it's right, that's probably the thing we're focusing the most on at the moment from a quality perspective. The other concern for us is that we do have pockets where, because they have workforce issues and they have vacancies, we have community pharmacies closing due to lack of pharmacists. We're getting a lot of push from particularly community pharmacy just to train more. And trying to hold our reins on, it's not just about more, it's more through a quality lens, is sort of a bit of a tension at the moment to say, no, we have a quality product, we have to find a way to deliver more through that quality product rather than moving away from that and just doing something because we want to train more. So that's a little bit of a tension for us at the moment, but we're holding our position. But we do need to find ways to be able to train more people. What isn't on this update, but will definitely be on the next update for the June meeting. We're in the quality planning phase for how we are going to quality assure clinical placements within the undergraduate. So as you know, we have a big piece of work now to increase the quality and quantity of clinical placements in our undergraduate 4-year programme to meet the new learning outcomes. So we're spending time now looking at that quality planning, making sure it's robust in the business case that's due to go to Welsh Government May, June this year. So using the quality framework to make sure this is about quality as well as quantity. So that's all I had to say, but happy to take any questions.
Margaret, so, some of that is, well, lots of that is so encouraging. And when you think back 6 months, it's moved a long way. And one of the nicest things is the enthusiasm that's being shown by people wanting to train in pharmacy, which wasn't universally the case going back, was it? So excellent. Who would like to come in on any of Margaret's points? No. Well, we look forward to hearing.
Sorry, Ruth. I did.
Sorry, what? Ruth,
Yeah, I've got my hands up.
hand is obscured by. Oh, you
Yeah.
have. Yeah, I will have to shout at me because I can't.
Yeah, Margaret, I'd like to endorse the work that's been going on in pharmacy. You know, since our last meeting, we've started a new pharmacy technician course with the University of East Anglia, and as Margaret said, we went through a robust procurement process, and we think we've got a really good supplier there for this course, and has the ability to expand the numbers should we wish to, which is really important for our service, because there's a big demand from our services that we have more pharmacy technicians, particularly as we have had a delay of 6 months where we would have started that. The pharmacy bit, so yeah, what we're talking about is it's undergraduate funding for clinical placements, which is similar to SIFT for doctors and dentists. And we've been in discussions with Welsh Government to first see if they want us to do it. Second, to talk about the cost and how we get our position into Welsh Government, which we're going to do alongside our exec team, education committee and the full board. And so I think that's the piece of work that we're talking about. We're in a good position to do that, and the General Pharmaceutical Council has requested all statutory education bodies to take on this role of quality managing the undergraduate placements. We already have clinical placements in the postgraduate arena in the foundation year, so we already have a handle on placements. But it will be a challenge. I think, you know, we talk about placements at virtually every section of our agenda. So I think that it's a really important piece of work, and you know, I thank my pharmacy colleagues and other execs for supporting that.
Thank you, Push. And I agree with you. Jill?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I'm going to ask a question on nearly every paper today. Just to it's my newness, I think, to the committee. So sorry, I'm really, really impressed with the work, Margaret. I think it's great and really exciting. There was one little thing that I just picked up, and I'm not sure if I've written it down right, but there seemed to be the agreements will be completed in April for the 2023 cohort. And I guess it just raised a quick question in my head. Was anybody likely to be working without a signed agreement, and who would be covering off any liability or risk? Would that be ours? So I may have misunderstood that.
They will all be in place by the time the trainees start. So any amendments that we're making will be completed and finished prior to them starting. So each cohort starts in August. So any changes or reviews need to be done now in advance of that. But so no, I don't feel there's any risk that we won't be, we're sort of ahead of the game. We learned in our first couple of years ago when we were right up to the wire how hard that was. But, so it is just a tweak and a review rather than any major overhaul.
Okay, thanks.
With that, thank you very much. And shall we move on to nursing and allied health professionals? And Lisa?
Bore da pawb, rwy'n cyflwyno adroddiad ar gyfer nyrsio a gweithwyr iechyd proffesiynol. So good morning, everybody. I'm actually introducing the report on nursing and health professionals. So actually, I'm taking it that you people have read this paper, but I just want to draw to your attention, and we have discussed it currently. Is about
Can't hear you very well. Is everybody else having that problem? No, oh, sorry. Right. Carry on.
Okay. So basically, we've touched on this in this particular.
Lisa might be on a different channel. Lisa, can you just check if you're on the English or Hear Translation channel for me, please?
I think that's
the button bottom of your screen.
Because it's Zoom translation, not Teams.
Hang on. Should I be? Oh, I'm on off. So do you want me to on English?
If you click to English, that should help.
Is that better?
It was fine anyhow, I think.
Oh no.
Is that better?
Okay, it might be an issue with your mic then, by the sounds of it. If you go to the channel you were on, if everybody else could hear you.
Hold on. So I've got it on English now. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll carry on. So we've touched on some of this conversation. I just want to highlight the issue that we've just discussed about clinical placements, and everybody's agreed this is a thread through all of the papers today. But actually explaining to you the work that we are doing as a multi-professional group in trying to address clinical placements is quite key. And one of the pieces of work that we are going to be exploring now is to try and commission to the top end of what we can commission in terms of education in response to health board need. But as a result of that, it's really important that we therefore develop the placements accordingly. And therefore, it's about making sure that we take that work forward. So it's recognising the work that we're currently undertaking with Margaret, with Kirsty, with our medical colleagues to enhance the quality standards within our placement arena, but also to use what we've got effectively and efficiently. So that piece of work is currently undertaken. Then sort of drawing on, we've mentioned in phase 2 strategic review, and I'm really pleased to report that Welsh Government has approved the procurement to proceed on healthcare support workers. You know, we brought this to the last meeting, so that is a significant step. So therefore, we can now invite tenders, and that will be considered at the next STREP programme board. So that's the phase that we're in in terms of healthcare support workers. And I'm pleased to report that that's progressing. We will touch on the approval process at a later agenda item as well. And alongside that, what we have picked up in the 3.5 is we picked up on the concerns that we brought to your attention previously. And obviously what we've updated you here on that progress. What we've wanted to draw to your attention is the one about the midwifery programme at the University of South Wales. Not only do we quality assure, the student learning and the education, we've also been looking here at the infrastructure within the education facility to ensure that they deliver quality education as well. So what you will see here is the conversations that we've been having with the Royal College of Midwives, as well as the Nursing and Midwifery Council, to ensure that University of South Wales have got the right infrastructure from the educators in order to deliver quality education programmes as well. I'll leave you there, but obviously Martin is a key sort of contributor to this programme, so we're happy to take any questions. Martin, I didn't know whether you wanted to add anything.
No, not really, Lisa, but just to say that we are keeping a really close eye on the University of South Wales midwifery programme. They, as part of the action plan, they've employed 4 new staff to strengthen their support of students on placements, preparing them for placements, dealing with queries from placements, and actually working to upskill the educators and mentors with refresher programmes. So they are doing an awful lot of work, but we are still monitoring it closely.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you both. Tina, I wonder if you've got any reflections on Lisa's paper.
I think it's really good to, thanks Lisa, I think it's really good to have the update with regard to Bangor and also the midwifery agenda. You've already mentioned about the issue of placements, and I've already mentioned, I was going to raise, Chair, in relation to the stakeholder group and how that feeds into the overall stakeholder group. I wonder, Lisa, in relation to the skills training critical care course, collaboration with Higher Education England, is that an all Wales agenda, or is it based primarily in South Wales? And how much longer is it going to take before we actually move forward on that?
So I'm pleased to say that course is already running. Which is quite key, but I'll bring Martin in because he's been absolutely instrumental in commissioning it with that. But that's how we work with Health Education England and our partners in Scotland to understand what education they deliver and how we can work collaboratively together in order to deliver that. Martin, please explain because there's been a lot of work to do this, but it's already being delivered.
Lisa, I lost the connection slightly then. Are we talking about the critical care training?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what we've done there, Tina, is we work closely with Health Education England. We've looked at the contract, we've looked at the competencies, we've agreed with Welsh Government, policy leads, chief nursing officer within the Welsh Government, that we want the same provision. We've already got 17 staff on a course in Wolverhampton. We've got 6 staff from Betsy on a course in Liverpool, and we're working with Coventry University, and we've got 2 upcoming cohorts, which will be 48 people in total, starting in April, across all of the health boards in Wales. What we're doing is we're looking at the various different models of delivery in England, and we will be evaluating those with a view to going out to tender for Welsh providers to deliver this for 2023. So far we've used 71 of the 100 places we've agreed with HEE, and I've just negotiated an extra 100 places with them up until August 2023, prior to our new provisions commencing then.
That's very helpful. Reason my asking this question is around the quality assurance moving forward when we're commissioning places from England universities, and how we get the quality and the cost efficiencies, that because there's always travel and all of that engaged in those programs. So it'd be interesting to see on reflection how this particular program, being critical care, has actually balanced out in terms of the quality provision and also the cost efficiencies that we might. I just wondered whether, in relation to some of the other programs that are commissioned, we mentioned the pharmacy technician program from Anglia University, whether that is also something we could include in the overall evaluation in terms of how we measure quality based on the higher education, presumably procurement of those programs. So they must have quality measures as well.
I think, Tina, you're right. As you said, all the programs that we commission are subject to a review and a performance reporting, an evaluation as well. And as Martin said, specifically in relation to the critical care arena, we are evaluating that with Health Education England, because what Martin is alluding to is understanding what is the most effective program that we will want to then commission going forward and bring into from our Welsh education providers. So it will be evaluated very sort of rigorously in that respect. And the health boards are going to be part of that evaluation as well. The demand for that course came from them. So they are an integral part of helping us to evaluate that too.
I think that's really, really helpful. So history doesn't repeat itself, because we had some problems when we were looking at paediatrics and neonates when we were outside of Wales delivering on the Welsh agenda. So I think from that perspective, it's useful going forward, knowing that this committee presumably will receive those feedback, that evaluation in due course. So thanks for that. Thanks, Chair.
It's an interesting area, and we're going to be no doubt coming back to it. Lisa, I don't know, my impression is that that the format of your reporting has changed since the last meeting, and it's really clear. I just wanted to say thank you for that. That is to follow on from Tina, but the other small point I want to make is so thrilled to see the progress with the healthcare support worker program. I mean, I think that is that's a central jewel, and love to see it. So brings us to the end, unless anyone else wants to contribute on nursing and allied health professions.
Ruth, I think Push and Mike have got hands up. Push, do you want to go first?
Sorry, that's an old hand.
Oh.
Is yours an old hand, Jill, or
no? Sorry, and this will be my last. I'll shut up after this one.
No, don't keep going, please.
I just wanted to ask Lisa about the education facilitator roles and the pilot that's going on, and wondered whether I'm not a great fan of the sort of silo way of sometimes working in terms of carving it up to individual health boards. And I just wondered, was consideration given to a wider footprint or a sort of mix and match footprint so that the education facilitators were more responsible to HEIW than to the health boards individually, so that we didn't just get sort of little silos in each of the health boards? So,
and I'm sure Martin's going to come in on this because there's a lot of work undertaken there. So that particular care home education facilitator pilot was undertaken by Hywel Dda. But I'm really pleased to say that as a result of that pilot and as a result of that learning, what we've done as far as HEIW is concerned, we've actually taken that model, learned from it, and we've actually introduced 3 care home education facilitators across Wales. So therefore, there are 3 there now, which are, and we've only just probably, and I'm sure Marty will actually, we've only just actually appointed the 3rd. And I'm very pleased to say that one of those who has actually joined us and joined HEIW to sort of develop that programme is one of the education facilities that was in that first pilot. So that's really successful. You're absolutely right, actually, in terms of it comes back to placements and it sits alongside the placement opportunity. Our education facilitators are absolutely key and instrumental to develop quality placements. We couldn't do without them. And that is a significant piece of work that we are reviewing currently in order to ensure that when we actually get to our future contracts, that we can deliver beyond the commissions that possibly achieve that we previously did. But I'll actually bring sort of Martin in because there is actually a step change as well. As you remember, we actually reviewed actually phase 1 actually of pre-reg education, and all those contracts were awarded last year. As a result of that contract, we've revised the way the education facilitators are deployed. So Martin, do you actually want to explain actually what is going to happen actually from September?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jill. It's a really good question because we've made a lot of movement in this respect, because the education facilitators historically have been within universities and therefore just supporting students from those universities. We've changed the practice going forward so that all of those education facilitators will now be separate from the universities and supporting any students going into that particular health board from any university. And we're also looking to make them more multi-professional where appropriate as well, because we've got a real focus on interprofessional placements and students training together in the teams they're likely to work in when they graduate. In doing that, we as HEIW have got a real leadership role over the practice education facilitators, because although they will be health board employed, we've got an overview on that, and we're developing principles that all practice education facilitators will need to adhere to in their job descriptions and the discharge of their duties, because we want all of our students to get an equitable quality experience wherever they go in Wales, be it in secondary, primary, community, care, etc. So we're really working on this, and we're developing a really strong PEF network that HEIW are leading on. So there is a real accountability now to HEIW.
Thank you, Martin. Margaret, did you want to come in on this or something different?
Yes, I just wanted to give the committee a bit of assurance, I suppose. Well, not assurance, actually an indication of how we're trying to work but all across HEIW. So the chef roles, we're linked in. So my regional leads for my foundation pharmacist training are now linking in with the chefs so that we can look for potential placements for our trainee pharmacists in care homes. So we're, I think it's about trying to maximise that placement capacity and use every resource that HEIW's got, as well as every resource that is out there. So I just wanted to also explain that this is looking at the whole breadth of things, not just particular silos as well of professions.
Thanks. Thank you, Margaret. And Jill, I think you had a comprehensive response to your point.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
With that, we're coming, I think, to the end of our education performance and quality section on the agenda. And just before we leave it, can I check with David? David, other than noting with gratitude these reports, there's nothing else we need to be making a decision on here that I've missed. You're on mute. Can't hear you, David.
Apologies, everybody. So with regards to the papers on medicine, dentistry and nursing, just for noting, with regards to the pharmacy paper, it is for noting, but specifically members are asked to note the new format for reporting on quality management in pharmacy, which was commented upon by the chair and welcomed, and to note that the reporting style will evolve and change in the future, and to chat. Yeah, so that's the only slight change. But
that's fine. Yeah. Exactly right. Thank you very much. Well, I say we note with gratitude because obviously things are continuing to move, and what you've just reported hides a massive amount of work, and some of it is obviously coming to fruition and very encouraging. So all the encouragement we can give you. Carry on. Let's move on now to our strategic matters. We've got two headline issues here. The first
Chair, we've got a break scheduled at this point. However, we are ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
Have a break at this stage. However, we're expecting to have the break at 11:30.
Do you want a break then? Go and get a. Yeah, good idea. What's the time now? Going to reconvene at past?
Yes.
That's it. Fine. See you later.
Okay, thank you.
Got to get used to having these breaks. It takes me back to school. We used to have
Very civilized.
a glass of milk and a currant bun. And there's none of, I can't say there's any of that going here. Are we all
You're
back?
lucky to get a glass of water and Anglesey.
Yeah. But the good news is the sun's come out.
Not here in Swansea, but I think the water in Anglesey would be very high quality, wouldn't it, David?
Yeah.
There was controversy because they put fluoride in. But it was very nice.
Good for your teeth. I'm sure
How do we
Kirsty would
know whether
agree.
people we can't see are back? The answer is we don't.
We don't. Well, there's only Margaret, who's sort of actively taking part in the. Here we are. And Hugh, if he's doing any translation. Although we do need Fiona, Catherine and Liz to be taking notes.
I'm here to push. I'm here as well.
Lisa, we owe you an apology for not being able to do your bit in Welsh.
I'm
sorry.
When I presented to the previous one, yes?
Yes. Well, you started in Welsh, but some of us couldn't hear, so.
I did indeed.
English, yeah. Just saying, I'm sorry.
No.
Just to check with Fiona, I was intending to present my paper in Welsh. Am I on the right channel?
If you stay on the channel you're on, and then anybody who wants to hear the English translation needs to switch to the Hear Translation channel.
Thank you.
When I do sort of, I tend to present it to the papers at the beginning, but I will translate and actually say them in Welsh and English. So is that okay, David?
Yes, that's great. Although there's no need for you to translate after, because he will have done that instantaneously.
Okay.
I'll make it time to start. So let's get going. And we're on part 3 of our agenda, which is strategic matters. 2 items: clinical associates in applied psychology progress, and approval process for the commission for part 2 of the strategic review, which is both of which are important items. So let's start with clinical associates. And Liz, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So dyma papur I gyflwyno rolau newydd I Gymru. Cyswllt clinigol mewn seicoleg gymhwysol. So this is a paper really to sort of present a new sort of role within Wales. These are clinical associates in applied psychology. These are very new in Wales, and what we actually have started to describe here is the journey that we've taken so far, and we are proceeding on in order to introduce these roles alongside the development of our current clinical doctorate programs in psychology. This is a very real need. So the paper describes the journey that we've taken so far. So we would like to achieve the meeting to sort of note the stakeholder engagement. This has been quite extensive, not only actually within Wales with our health boards and colleagues, but also extensively we've learned many lessons from colleagues in Scotland and England, because these roles are already introduced there and actually have been well received and actually accepted. So really it's actually understanding the stakeholder engagement, and Martin, I have to say, he has played an instrumental part in actually sort of undertaking this work. And then it's about supporting the bespoke proposal that we want to undertake for this year. This is actually in line with Welsh Government's mental health priorities, and this role is very, very much needed. very urgently as well. So we actually want to support the bespoke proposal for a programme to be introduced for the CAPS element achieved for this year, or hopefully achieve the beginning of next year at the latest. But then obviously we will be noting and taking this into our wider procurement when we actually undertake the psychology procurements going forward as well. So that's the key elements actually out of this particular programme. But just to give you a broad overview of what is a CAP, actually, and you will hear this word being mentioned many times. They are psychology graduates who've completed a one-year programme at full master's level to become a skilled clinical associate applied psychologist. And they will work within their scope of practice. So the training, and I'm sure Martin will describe what that entails, will be under the direct supervision of clinical psychologists that we've currently got in the service. They can work actually alongside a wide variety of areas, and they are very, very well valued, as I said. And they then will be actually supervising clinical practice actually when they qualify as well. So I'm going to sort of open up to questions, because there may be questions arising from the paper. And I will actually bring Martin in, because he has done the extensive work on getting us to this stage. Martin, did you want to add anything there?
No, just to say that we're currently out for an expression of interest for someone to come in and work with us for 6 months on this, with a remit around 3 key areas. We're just finalising the job description that we've developed to make sure it's absolutely fit for purpose for what we want in Wales. To work on the finalisation of the curriculum development, again, to make sure that that's targeted to what we need in Wales, and then to do a review of the clinical capacity out there to support trainees and our expanding numbers of clinical doctorate trainees, to see actually where we can put the trainee caps to pick up all of their learning outcomes.
Thank you both. I just would like to remind committee that we are asked to note the stakeholder engagement, to note and support the proposal surrounding the tendering, and to support the bespoke proposal for the introduction of the CAPS education programme in South Wales. So this is a little bit more than just noting. But with that, I'll open it up for your observations and comments. Maybe I could just start by saying, Lisa, in many ways, this looks such a logical step. You wonder why we haven't got on with it earlier. And to ask with that, to what extent we're behind elsewhere or not.
Martin, do you want to respond to that? Because obviously it's about understanding that journey is important to respond to, Ruth.
So they don't have these roles in Northern Ireland at all at the moment. They do have them in England, and they do have them in Scotland, and we've looked at both models. Been in Scotland for a number of years. They're newer in England. In Scotland, they are band 7 roles, and having a master's, that feels appropriate. And in England, they are currently band 6, and they have more limited scope of practice in England. So we are a little bit behind those two countries. However, we are learning quickly from the benefits and actually lessons learned from those two countries to create something really innovative in Wales. And as part of our stakeholder engagement, which has been quite extensive, with lots of heads of service of adult and child psychology, as well as directors of therapies, etc., we're really looking and pushing the boundaries of where CAPS can make a difference in the communities. So I think actually we will be best placed in Wales, having them between the assistant psychologists in the health boards who have a psychology degree and the doctorate programme, and actually their scope of practice is going to be really akin to that in Scotland.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you, Martin. Push, you want to come in? Yeah,
so entirely supportive of this. This follows the same sort of model as many others. Physician associates, anaesthetic associates, surgical care practitioners, advanced critical care practitioners, and I think it's really important that we look at skill mix in this way, because what, for example, in emergency medicine, the only solution seems to be from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine is more consultants. Well, actually, the solution to the problems of the service that we have is multifold, and in mental health, this is an important part of that jigsaw. So very supportive of it. The other thing I'd say is that when this went to execs, we were asked to build in some evaluation into this. So I've asked Anton in the medical directorate as part of Eric to consider this and see what the costs would be of doing an evaluation of this, so that we can show that what track we're on, and hopefully the right one.
Well, I think that would be very interesting and useful if that transpires, because it will potentially have wider application to other similar development roles. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I know I'm observing the meeting today, so I hope it's appropriate if I just ask a quick question, if that's okay with you, Chair. Just in relation to the context for why this is needed, and I suppose it was just for me to understand a bit more about some of those challenges and problems that this was identified as a solution to solve. I'm just wondering, is it just around the overall skills mix of people that we have working in this sphere? Is it about the changing needs and pattern of service delivery that's needed, particularly for those people who are presenting with levels of mental ill health? And I suppose it was how it fits in with the mental health workforce plan that we've now gone out to consultation on, because I know the plan talks itself about high vacancy numbers. And I was wondering if it was part of that. I'm guessing it is part of that, but in a sense where it fits.
Lisa, do you want to come back on that, or Martin?
I think Martin will come back on it.
So Jonathan, I think the answer is all of the above. There's growing pressures, obviously, on our psychological services, therapy services across Wales, particularly highlighted because of COVID. There's pressure to get more doctorate in clinical psychology, psychologists into the service. However, they are getting a more diverse portfolio of work. And some of that work they probably shouldn't be doing, but there's no one else to do it. So actually introducing CAPS is that career escalator in psychological therapies, but it also means that we can get more of our staff working at the top of their license by freeing up some of that higher intensity, medium to high intensity work currently undertaken by clinical psychologists for the CAPS to do. So in answer to your question, Jonathan, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's all of the above.
Push, is it on the?
It's on this topic. I think it's what we're seeing in the service is a big change in where we were, say, 15, 20 years ago. Mental health was almost sidelined into its own hospitals, its own wards, its own job plans, when actually what we know is that people with mental health issues end up everywhere in our healthcare system, absolutely everywhere, be it in other parts of primary care, be it related to maternity and postnatal depression, be it pain clinics where people have got chronic pain or head injuries, or people who've got mental health who happen to come in for other operations as part of their physical needs. So I think we're rapidly recognizing that we've got to look after the mental well-being of patients in a multitude of situations. I'm from critical care, so having people who were dependent on drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or other things was what do they call them? Performance enhancing drugs for some of the bodybuilders. Some of those things were big issues in patients who are on intensive care. So I think we need to understand that our mental health services need to be out of the old sanatorium type hospitals, but into the services everywhere else. So I think getting the jigsaw right for that is really important. For years, our psychology community has been complaining that there's not enough psychologists. I think they were looking for more consultant psychologists, but this is actually, I think, the right approach to support psychology services. We also had lots of psychiatrists, not using the time to do psychiatric work, but doing psychology work. So I think that this will hopefully free up both psychiatry time and consultant psychology time. So I think there's a real need in the service for this. So I think that's the value that'll come from it.
Thank you, Chair. That's really helpful.
Tina, it's a different topic, is it? You got
Still related to this, but I just want.
sorry, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I overlooked you. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. I put my hands up a couple of times. Other people have answered the same question, so I would have taken it down. So
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. The question I have, I guess, is in relation to the paper and the role of the BPS and the regulatory elements in relation to this new role, and how, because we've identified some risks, but I just want to hear something around how we are ensuring that we're compliant with standards. Thanks.
So I can come in a little bit there. The course will be approved by the BPS. It's not accredited at the moment by HCPC. It's not an accredited profession in England nor Scotland either. But I've had conversations with both England and Scotland that in about 12 months' time we will try and engage, because this is a legislative change as well, and work sort of government and work with the regulators around this. But at the moment, it's not a regulated profession anywhere in the UK. However, it will come under the governance arrangements of clinical psychology as stipulated by the BPS.
Chair, that would be helpful just to have that point clarified a little bit further within the paper, because I'm aware of that, which is why I asked the question. But in support of that, I think given the area of practice and clinical practice, Martin, I think the fact that we've looked at this and we know that there potentially may be regulation coming in within a year to 2 years, then I think we need to note that somewhere. Thanks.
Could I add something to that?
Do you want to come in on this quick?
Yeah. So when we had physician associates and anaesthetic associates who haven't been regulated yet, they've had voluntary registers, one with the Royal College of Physicians and the other one with the Royal College of Anaesthetists. So I'm wondering whether we should explore, perhaps with the other education bodies, Martin and Lisa, whether we should create a voluntary register or see if there's a professional body who would be willing to do that. Maybe the Royal College of Psychiatrists or something different. Just a thought. Just thought I'd ask that.
No, I think that's a really helpful thought. Lisa?
In a way, Push, that you took the words out of my mouth, really, actually, to remind everybody that obviously we have got other roles as in physician associates. And I think it was only, I can't remember which meeting we were at, Martin. I was reflecting on how many years that we've been waiting for that regulation. So there are other professions that we've got which are not currently regulated. The physician associate one, we've been waiting for a number of years, not quite sure where we are yet. I think actually Push's proposal is quite helpful. And I think by actually working together, actually in England, actually sort of Scotland and ourselves, there is more of an opportunity really to create that register, because as you can imagine, Tina, actually everybody is actually aspiring to make sure that clinical practice is safe and of good quality. And this particular role has been really welcomed. I mean, I know actually how this was actually introduced in England and has been very well received, not only actually by sort of the rest of the profession, but by actually the population as well. It's been absolutely key in helping actually to address actually a number of mental health actually arenas where they didn't need to go sort of any further into that secondary care arena. So they are very, very well received, definitely. But your point is well made, Tina, and we will actually explore that further.
Thanks. Can I just come back on that? Because I recognise that and I'm aware of all this stuff around physicians associates. So Push, I really think your idea is an excellent one. And I just wondered, Margaret, in relation to pharmacy, because their assistants are registered and regulated, to see whether there are any specific areas within there that we could transfer some of the requirements and skills, because mental health is a particular vulnerable area of practice, both for the practitioner and also for the client, and what can be associated with that can be tremendous. So that's the reason I'm asking, so that we're absolutely aware of the potential. I don't disagree with the introduction. I just think that we've got to safeguard both the employer and also the clients that they're engaged with. This is a particularly difficult field. Thanks.
I think that's some quite constructive
Margaret?
areas of thinking for you to take away and maybe come back with next time we meet, and we can note for our recommendation to the board that point.
Ruth Margaret's got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Margaret. Sorry.
That's okay, thank you, Chair. Just building on that, from our reflections and experience from pharmacy when we introduced our pharmacy technicians onto the register, and just building on some of the comments and listening to it, I think one of the things that's going to be key with this, even if they're not registered, is building in that professional principle of a registered professional, because I think retrospectively, trying to then get a workforce who aren't registered professionals to understand what a registered professional is required is quite challenging, because you have a whole workforce who didn't sign up for that, and then suddenly we're asking them to sign up for that. So if we think that's something that we should be considering, and maybe as we're rolling out these posts, I know they're not registered, but some of those principles of a registered professional could be started to be embedded so that it isn't a shock if they become a registered professional. So that's our learning from pharmacy, that we're in catch up all the time now, trying to, with a sort of legacy workforce, trying to get them into that space, which they just weren't recruited to in the first place.
It's a really good point that you, Margaret, and that's, really helpful advice there.
This is something that you might run past your stakeholders.
Well, all our stakeholders who are what I would say is a specialist in this arena are very integral to this process as well. But that's the group that we will discuss these things with. Yes, absolutely, Ruth.
I'm just thinking on now. We're asked to note the stakeholder engagement that's taking place, and actually that links with Jill's point earlier about the stakeholder reference group, not thinking it's the be all and the end all. It isn't the only thing. And so here we've got another mechanism entirely and doing another function. But I take it that we do support the stakeholder engagement here, and the DOTHS is what?
Directors of Therapies.
Right, thank you. And the Directors of Therapies support to proceed with developing this. So that's good. Do we support the bespoke proposal for the introduction of the education programme in South Wales for 2023? 2023? Yep. And we note and support the proposals around the tendering for the that's the doctorate, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. For clinical psychology and the CAPS programs.
And just to assure you, Ruth, that obviously, you're not signing off that actual tender process at this point. It's just the direction of travel, because we will be bringing back more detailed, tendering out information, because that's currently being developed. And just picking up on your point there about and what Tina alluded to earlier in terms of the different levels of engagement, what we have agreed to do is, as we go out with our tenders, as we develop the programs and strategic review phase 2, we are actually letting all the members from the stakeholder reference group that we are doing that. In other words, we are inviting them either to be engaged in personally, or to make sure there's somebody actually from their organisation, actually discipline, is involved as well. Now, not everybody will get engaged with every programme, but at least then we've made them aware of what programmes are being reviewed, and they can actually play a part and feed back into that. So the example I'll give you, we've just embarked actually on the engagement for ultrasound education, and we shared that engagement invitation with all the members on the stakeholder reference group.
Well, I think that's good, and that's going to be part of the learning as we move forward, how we connect all this stuff, because it's going to be pretty extensive by the time we've mapped the whole stakeholder engagement contribution across the organisation, of which the SRG is one important component. Right, well, we look forward to hearing more about that, and with that we'll move on to the second item on our strategic agenda section, which is the strategic review phase 2 and the processes that are being proposed for assurance around that.
So dyma ni'n cynnig, dyma ni'n cynnig broses gymeradwyo ar gyfer Comisiynu Addysg ar ran adolygiad strategol cyfnod 2. So what this paper is describing to you is you're all aware of actually strategic review actually of education phase 2, and that is quite a complex programme of work which includes a number of education programmes that are being reviewed. What we were very mindful of as a programme board was actually the approvals process for not only the tender, but actually definitely the award actually at the end. And we've actually reviewed actually what needed to be actually undertaken. We've actually reviewed with standing orders, and David and our legal colleagues and our procurement colleagues have been helpful in actually understanding this process. And what this describes is actually the levels of approval that we in HIW need to undertake in order to take these procurements through. So this paper actually describes that in detail actually, and the key area is actually section 4, and I will bring David in on this because actually he's actually helped actually to write this paper too. In reflecting our standing orders, what we've determined is actually what can be agreed at an executive team level, as in the chief exec being signed off, and what needs to come to board. And what you find that in section 4 that describes that process for you. But actually on doing that, what we actually realised was that with regards to the board and this particular education committee, there was a bit of things that were not in alignment, so that this particular committee meets 4 times a year, and obviously the board meets 6 times a year. And sometimes if we need to probably align those in order that we can make sure that we can progress our procurement in a swift and effective and efficient manner. So members will be aware about our sort of meeting arrangements, but to support that the £5 million contracts are considered swiftly by ECQC and then recommended to the board, there is a proposal there that there may be a need for additional 2 meetings of this particular committee to be called in order to support that process going forward. And that's actually what this proposal is about. Now, at this point in time, we're just currently reviewing, which of the programmes are actually sort of obviously requiring that process if this is agreed. And then obviously we will bring the timetable and the example of actually when actually we would actually may have to factor in the additional 2 meetings. I hope that's clear. David, do you want to add to that?
I think that was quite comprehensive, Lisa. I'd be happy to take any questions with regards to the process. I guess the only element I just want to emphasise with regards to the paper is that there are 2 key stages in terms of approval here. One is the initial process around the contract specification. And if you look at page 3, there are two tables there. So the out to tender element is the actual approval process for the specification. And then the second column is the actual approval around who wins the contract. So that's the evaluation of the end of the process, the evaluation of the tenders and deciding to whom we award the contracts. There are two key elements there. So with regards to contracts that have a value of less than 5 million, the decision-making entity is the execs itself, which is in line with the delegated financial limit for the chief executive. And then any contracts with a total contract value in excess of £5 million, those contracts evaluation would come through this committee, asking for a recommendation to approve to the board, but the final decision itself would be taken by the board itself in line with our standing orders. But happy to take any questions with regards to.
And just to add this, we would want to share this with the audit committee as well, in order that there was clarity of process.
Thank you, Lisa. Tina, this is going to fall in your lap very shortly. So I just wondered if you want to reflect on it, because the implications for the number of times this committee meets, for example, there are practical implications for us. There's that, and not least our explicit role in providing assurance as the processes progress.
I think that's an interesting question, Ruth, because we've had discussions about the frequency of these meetings and actually not holding back some of the processes that need to be adhered to. I'd be interested to hear from Jill in terms of audit, because I think the table that's outlined is very, very helpful. And we have got financial standing orders in relation to the funds, but I do think that the assurance that we're required to deliver based on this, I think this paper is very, very helpful. I'm not opposed to having additional meetings if the requirement is necessary. The only difficulty is this going forward, this 1 or 2 years may well determine the frequency of these meetings and the timeline. And I don't know how Jill feels in relation to the audit committee, whether she feels this is something that the audit committee would want to have sight on at the same time or afterwards, because that, and again, feeds in between something that potentially could challenge us in terms of timeframes of then giving assurance to the board. Hope you've understood what I'm saying there, is that if you've got two committees looking at it, the timeline of when we're giving assurance, or if we have a query in relation to assurance prior to making recommendations to the board, that's the bit.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, sorry, could I have one key point that I omitted, is that clearly this paper is outlining the approval process for these phase 2 contracts. And given that, this paper will also be going to the audit committee, the next meeting of the audit committee. I'm sorry, I didn't highlight that when I was talking the exposition of the paper. Thank you.
That's helpful because that clarifies it again. Thanks.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Jill.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, if we need additional committee meetings, like as Tina says, you know, not averse to that in terms of the process. Ruth and I had the benefit, I guess, of running through an early version of the table that's in front of us, and some of the things that we raised is that the audit committee wouldn't ordinarily take any contracts that were delegated. So if it's delegated to the chief executive to make the decision, we wouldn't expect to be crawling over that in any shape or form. That's the point of a delegation. So I think that we need to be clear that we don't sort of duplicate everything that the executives are delegated to do at these committees. So that would be my first point. The second issue, I had two issues that I just wanted to raise briefly, is that we raised a couple of months ago, David, that the Welsh Government's approval process could trip us up big time on this. And I just wonder how much pressure we've been able to bring to bear in terms of clarity over what they want. you know, if they change their minds and want to see every single one, to whether to approve, to note, or whatever they're going to do with it, that's really key, because we need to factor that in into the whole timetable. So early clarification on, are they going to ask for everything over £1 million is really, really important, I think. And the second issue was around procurement. Given that we've had some issues, is there any risk that, and Martin can probably answer this carefully, I guess, is there any risk in terms of our advice and the capacity to deliver on some of these, or are we doing the bulk of that, I guess, ourselves, and so therefore the risk is minimised? So they were my two questions, and I think the Welsh Government one is the one that troubles me, I think, perhaps the most.
Can I?
David, do you want to come back
Yes.
on this, or shall we ask Martin?
So,
yeah.
So Martin Pennell has been working with Welsh Government with regards to point around the amendments to proposed amendments, I'm sorry, to the standing financial instructions. So currently, the position is that with regards to any contract that in excess of £1 million, the general rule is that we would need to notify Welsh Government. Rhiannon, correct me if I'm wrong. But there are certain exceptions, and one key exception that is very relevant here is that if it's within the annual commissioning of education and training, then we don't.
Sorry, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah. So they're looking, so we're currently still in conversation with them there, because it appears that they are looking to possibly remove that exception, but we're still in conversation with them, and Martin Pennell, I think, is leading on that. And obviously, I think Rhiannon might want to step in and add any further information there. I actually picked up 3 points from your, there was another point, sorry, earlier on, with regards to not duplicating the work of the exec. We hope we've taken that into account here, so that while obviously it's for the execs to take the decisions with regards to contracts of less than £5 million, we will, given the nature, the size, the overall size of the and the importance of this particular piece of work, we will be providing regular reports with regards to contracts that are less than £5 million, so that the committee is aware and is assured in terms of the work that we're undertaking there. I think, is it Rhiannon picking up the point of procurement, or possibly Martin? So perhaps take any questions on that response.
I just wonder whether we could bring Rhiannon in now, whether that would be the best way around.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. So I think David's just covered our sort of ongoing conversation with Welsh Government about the SFIs and exactly what the requirement is around, the levels that are set out in that paper, and we'll be able to clarify that going forward. In terms of procurement, there is dedicated procurement support for the strategic review, as there was with phase 1 and similarly in phase 2. The sort of recent changes to the operating model in the procurement team in shared services actually mean that team are going to be enhanced, and more of our procurement work is going to move over into that team, because that's where the specialist knowledge is around procuring education and training. So we're anticipating a real benefit to more of our work being undertaken by that sort of central, they call the commissioning team, but their expertise is in the category management for education and training. So there's dedicated support for this work at the moment, and more of our procurement work will be going into that team. So we can see real benefits in that, across all of the different procurements across the organisation.
That's helpful, thanks. Liz, is it you or Martin next?
I was just going to add, really, so I think we've answered the Welsh Government, that David's done that, and that obviously the procurement capacity, good question, Jill, I think Rhiannon's actually answered that one. In terms of the role of the Audit Committee, I think it was about sharing this paper with the Audit Committee for them to understand it. I don't think we'd anticipated that we would actually take every one of those over £5 million sort of procurements to Audit Committee as well. And that wasn't actually the thoughts behind this paper. Basically, if you remember, what we did do I think it was the last meeting, that we did take the first job, the healthcare support worker process. We did take that through exec team. We brought it to this meeting, and it's as a result of the discussions at this meeting, we then recommended to the board that actually then progressed to the tender. And that is actually the model that we would actually hope to be aspiring to. So therefore, it's the over 5 million ones that are key to this process. But actually, sort of David is absolutely right. Despite actually that's the one that needs actually sort of consideration and recommendation, we would of course be reporting through actually our regular reporting actually from my sort of director's report, that, you know, how that is progressing with all the other programs as well. So this committee would be made aware of the ones that are under that threshold as well. Martin, please come in.
Thank you. Martin?
Yeah, no, thank you. The only other thing I wanted to add as well, which again is for additional assurance, part of the contract, we have funding to buy in support from legal and risk services. So we have a contracting and commercial lawyer who works very closely with us on all aspects and actually sits on our steering group as well. So that gives us some additional assurance.
Thank you. We've got Rhiannon and David, you've still got hands up. So do you want to come back?
Sorry.
No, okay. Coming back to you, Tina, is there anything else you would want to clarify now at this stage?
No, not going forward, no. I'm quite happy.
Okay. In which case, are we as a committee content to support this and recommend it to the board? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. Thank you. I think that's required to contribute here, David.
Thank you.
And Ruth, actually, what we will do is we will bring back to at the next meeting where we anticipated there may be a need for future meetings. We'd obviously take into account the notice that's needed to do that. And that's the work that we're currently going through. And as Jill says, really, we're taking heed of our procurement and legal colleagues as to, you know, what their sort of capacity is in order to progress those as well. Just it's about a joint approach there, but we are working on that as we speak.
Well, we appreciate that, and just a word of tribute. I mean, this is really tricky territory. It's not easy to see your way through it, and it's obviously taken a bit of time. But I am assured by what we've seen that you are taking a careful and thoughtful and robust approach. So I would like to acknowledge that and say thank you. We look forward to hearing more. Sorry, David.
Thank you.
Right. The discussion that we've just had actually relevant to our next agenda item, which is the forward look. And so if we can move us on, David, this has come to us because it's a requirement for us to, it's a formal requirement for us to look at this once a year.
Yes, that's correct. Shall I present the paper?
But as it currently stands, it doesn't accommodate the discussions that we've just been having. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle this, in that we may need additional meetings.
So we've just approved the structure, if you like, of how we will deal with the phase 2 contracts as they come through. What we haven't yet done is that, as I understand it, there's at least 20 contracts with regards to phase 2. What we haven't got in place yet is that, based on the framework we've just approved, is the exact timetable for those 20 contracts. So what we will be doing going forward is we'll be applying that framework and matching it to the contract that we need to get approved over the next couple of years. And we will based on that information, we will be able to determine whether we need those additional 2 meetings. And remember, I think only 5 of the contracts have a contract value of more than £5 million. And it's those 5 contracts that possibly will require an additional 2 meetings, depending on when we need approval.
And we've already done one.
Oh, so
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Tina.
So yeah, so those 2 additional meetings are giving us flexibility and enabling us to move quickly as quickly as possible with regards to those 2 processes of approving the spec and approving the contract itself. But at this moment in time, we can't confirm the exact dates. But what we were seeking was approval in principle that we could have those additional 2 meetings, and to forewarn the committee that we may need to do that.
Thank you. Tina, I've looked at this table, and to me it seems very straightforward. I don't know whether you've any thoughts about where we go from here, whether we just accept this today and endorse that, and we'll have to amend it as, or you will have to see whether you wish to amend it as time goes by.
I think from a committee perspective, it's extremely useful to have a forward work programme, but after today, I would welcome a conversation with David so I can go through this in a bit more detail, maybe on a one-to-one, and then come back to the next meeting with any revisions that I might want to put to the committee to consider. Because I think working to this forward work programme and also the mental health strategy that potentially will impact, I think we've got a number of other challenges that might be coming forth. So I'd welcome a conversation, maybe an hour or so's meeting with you, David, face to face, where I can sit down and go through some of this, and then chair bring any changes back to the next meeting that we have.
Is that all right with you, David?
Yes, of course. I welcome that conversation. We'll therefore note the forward work programme subject to the and on the basis that we have a further conversation with the chair. So we'll bring the forward work programme back to the next meeting of the committee. Therefore.
Thank you. I think that's what we'll do.
Okay.
So we can move on now to I think it's the final item. I'm caught up with our agenda quite on the agenda, which is some feedback on the multi-professional education and quality group or committee. Right. Yes.
So Lisa and I have been having discussions about this because if you recall, this was a 6-monthly meeting. So it got us to thinking as to what items go to that meeting. And when we looked at them, virtually all of them go to the senior leadership team as well. And the senior leadership team is where execs now senior leadership team meet, obviously. And a lot of that either originates from exec team or then goes to exec team for further work. And that is a route with which many of our items that come to education committee come from. So, so our thoughts were either we need to really look at this committee, this education quality group, and have it as something that exec team refers things to be thrashed out, or directly to education committee. So I think I'm speaking for Lisa here. We felt that we didn't want to be duplicating places where we present the types of items that go there, and the choice between either having more frequent meetings of a group that was duplicating things in other scenarios was probably not the right way to use our time best. And perhaps what we should be doing is firming up the process as to how things come to education committee, rather than through something that is only at the moment held every 6 months. Have I got that right? Have I made that clear? Because otherwise we'll be saying we're going there, but most things go through exec team anyway before they come to education committee, because all execs need to be cited on them. So we've ended up getting to the situation where we think that that we probably haven't got a reason to keep this meeting going. And in addition to that, one of the things that we're just in the process of creating is looking at how senior leadership team works as well, because we at exec team we've recently approved that the tier of leaders just below exec team probably need a forum of their own where they can thrash out some of the big issues and feed those into exec team as well. And I see that that's probably the place where most of the things that will come to education committee, and that's the path of things coming to education committee, will be either from exec team directly or from the, how shall I call them, the deputies and deans group, because I think that's the place where most things related to education will come from. And I just think it's a bit neater to have everything coming through exec team, so all execs are cited on everything that comes to all of our board committees actually. So I think, is that a fair reflection of what our conversations have been, Lisa?
Absolutely, and it just goes back, you know, it was called the internal advisory group, actually, where we had an external advisory group at as in the education advisory group. We've revisited that. The push is absolutely right, really. We couldn't see actually how something could sometimes come directly to ECQC without actually making others and other committees within HEIW aware of that. So push is right. I'm not going to dwell on it. I think the question was actually, what is the added value of that particular group? And should it be one that we consider standing down?
What do others think? What do Kirsty and Margaret and Tom think?
So I can tell you what Tom thinks because he said to me, he actually said, what's the purpose of this group and where
exactly,
you know, and
we struggle to pull an agenda together actually, because it's, you know, otherwise we would be duplicating what we have already taken elsewhere.
So that was Tom's view, but Kirsty and Margaret haven't asked them.
I would agree. I think it's reflective that HEIW is evolving and maturing a little bit, and other groups are being left, and this is now duplication. It is absolutely that, and I think you're right. And the deans and deputies will be the forum which things will funnel through, as you say, push. So I do agree.
Margaret?
Yeah, I agree as well. What I would like to see, because that deputy director and dean's group hasn't formed yet. We're talking about the terms of reference and what that looks like. So for my, I suppose, assurance, I want to see that set up and what that looks like, so we actually understand the reporting structures, what the decision making is within that group, how any decisions have to be escalated in the whole governance. So I don't disagree with us having a different group that does something, but I just want to, I suppose, put a bit of a park it until I see what the new looks like and if it actually fits purpose.
So just to add to that, Margaret, obviously the remit is that you feel to set that group up by April 1st. So that's the speed of it. But I think I don't think what Push and I are saying that the multi-professional group as it currently stands wasn't added value. It's not as if we are missing anything.
Tina, you were here when we saw the emergence of this group. Have you got any thoughts on it, or would you be happy to support the proposals to look again and possibly disband it?
I think, given listening to the conversation, I think the maturity of the organisation as it's gone forward has set up and examined quite a number of escalation processes and the governance around that. And given the workload of the current committee, I would prefer to have things escalated to us through the channels that Push has identified. What we're here do, you know, in terms of the governance and make and assure to make recommendations to the board. But I also see where Margaret's coming from in terms that they're assured that the escalation of key business areas are actually clarified. And I would welcome that from the committee going forward, so that we actually do see where those systems and processes are clearly outlined, and then there's no grey areas, you know. So from that perspective, I think the conversation has been immensely helpful. And you know, form follows function. So if we're now got other processes involved, it's timely to look at curtailing some of the areas where we don't need to be spending our time, because there is sufficient scrutiny at senior leadership and executive level for us to give the assurance to the board of important matters of what our terms of reference are set up to do. So I'd be supportive in that, providing that we have that I guess the escalation process clearly outlined, so we actually consider that at the committee and approve that, so we actually take assurance that we're content that all those issues will be covered within the organisation.
So Lisa and I can work with David on producing what would our chairman call a wiring diagram of how things come to education committee. What I would say is that you know, Tina and Ruth, you'll recall that the reason that we created these was we already had something within the medical deanery called a quality committee, and that had external stakeholders as well as internal stakeholders. So when we created the EAG and this group, it was to replicate the function that we already had. So in a sense, they were there for that purpose. But as has already been said, we've replaced the EAG with something probably even bigger and better. And I think it's the right time to review the function of this particular group, because that's the history of where it came from. But you know, so many things now go through SLT to be presented, and so many, and we're looking at the function of SLT in the future, so that the major, we see that the major items will go through this deputies group from an exec team perspective. Although, you know, it's for them to create, it's their group, not ours, it's their group, and they have to, you know, they have to develop their terms of reference and decide on how they're going to function. But that's where I see the industry of our work being really worked through. So so I think this is a natural progression of where we've come from to where we're going.
Anybody else want to say anything before we wind this up? I think that I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And having been there at the beginning and knowing you know, why it was originally set up, I can see that things have changed and we need to adapt accordingly. But I'm also mindful of the formality around this. So it was formally set up with approval from the board, and therefore I do think we need this in writing. We need the rationale just explaining on a sheet of paper, and the proposals for the way forward, supported by those people who are currently on the group, to come probably to this committee, and then certainly at some point, I presume, David will have to go back to the board, will it?
I'm smiling because that's exactly right. So this is a subcommittee that was created as a subcommittee of this committee, and consequently, we should have a written report coming to this committee confirming that we need to close down the group. And then we need to make a recommendation to the board, and it's the board itself that will formally close down the group.
So I think the next meeting of this committee needs a paper.
Yeah. So in the meantime, I think we have to take it through execs, because Alex invited Lisa and myself to have a think about this and propose it to her as the chief exec. So David, I think myself, Lisa, and you need to do that. The same paper then can go to education committee and then to board.
Yeah, well, I think that's the right route of action. So let's go that way.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing it forward. And it's timely. So where are we on our agenda? We have nothing for information or noting this time. So we come to the end unless anyone has any other business. And I am delighted to hand you over into the safe hands of Tina for the next meeting, which will be on Tuesday, the 14th of June. So that that completes our open meeting. We have got brief in-committee session to hold yet. So are we going to do that straight away, or would you like a break?
I'd just say before we go to formally, we did it earlier on, to say a huge thanks to you for the work that you put into the committee. Good luck also as vice chair of the board, and I'm looking forward to you remaining on this committee and picking your brains and being there, working as a team. So huge thanks.
Absolutely.
For everything
Agreed.
that you've actually led, and you know, the committee is doing a lot of excellent work, and the design of which is also down to you as chair. So thanks very, very much sincerely.
Well, that's kind of you. I had such a lot of support, and I hope to be able to give you any support that you need in my new role, sitting in the back benches. David, you
Just to confirm, the meeting, the closed session is scheduled for 1:45. Do you want to bring that forward, or?
sorry, the closed session is?
Let's get it over with, shall we?
Yes, it's scheduled for 1:45, so let's move directly over. Okay, great. That's fine.
Shall we carry on directly?
Yeah.
And we have to
We have to join with Teams, I think.
Yes.
Okay, right.
because we
See you shortly,
public.
folks, then.